Hi and welcome to St Ninian's Church in Stonehouse. My name's Stuart and I get to be the minister here. Thanks for joining us from wherever you find yourself today. We're glad that you've chosen to be with us.
A reading from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 5, verses 12 to 15. Observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. For 6 days you shall labour and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, or your son or your daughter, or your male or female slave, or your ox or your donkey, or any of your livestock, or the resident alien in your towns, so that your male and female slave may rest as well as you. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. A reading from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 2, verses 23 to chapter 3, verse 6. One Sabbath he was going through the cornfields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need of food? He entered the house of God when Abiathar was high priest, and ate the bread of the presence, which it is not lawful for any but the priests to eat, and he gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath." Again he entered the synagogue, and a man was there who had a withered hand. They watched him to see whether he would cure him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man who had the withered hand, "Come forward." Then he said to them, "Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to kill?" But they were silent. He looked around at them with anger. He was grieved at their hardness of heart and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately conspired with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him.
Once the great Antony of the desert was relaxing with his disciples outside his hut when a hunter came by. The hunter was surprised to see Antony relaxing, and he rebuffed him for taking it easy. This was not his idea of how a monk, a holy man, should behave. Antony replied, "Bend your bow and shoot an arrow." And the hunter did so. "Bend it again and shoot an arrow." And the hunter did so again and again and again. Finally, the hunter said, "Father Antony, if I keep my bow always stretched, it will break." "So it is with us," replied Antony. "If we push ourselves beyond measure, we will break. It's right from time to time to relax our efforts." So today we're just going to sit in quiet for 15 minutes. We're not, sorry. But imagine if we did. Imagine if we did. I'd argue that Sabbath is the most radical of the 10 Commandments. It's by far the most countercultural thing ever asked of us, and probably the hardest commandment to keep. Actually, we can't even imagine keeping it. Let's be honest, we struggle with the others, and we find the one where Jesus said that we should love our neighbours. That's almost impossible. But Sabbath, I'm not actually sure I've ever met anyone who could keep Sabbath. It should be pretty straightforward. Have a day off. Have a day off, all of you. Everyone. All at the same time. For most of us, the day off bit is hard enough. I'm absolutely dreadful at it. But then, I could make a really flimsy argument that actually I don't ever work. And not just in the way that you all make jokes about an hour on a Sunday. Technically, I'm an office holder. I'm not an employee. I don't get a salary, I get a stipend. And a stipend is a payment that's made so that I don't have to work. So I can volunteer all the time. So technically, I've never done a day's work in my life. And that's what we do with that kind of passage, isn't it? What's work? What counts as work? What counts as rest? And what are they for? And why does it matter? I wonder if you can imagine that for one day a week, all of us would not be able to do anything that involves someone else working. What would that be like? So, for example, I quite like to spend Sunday afternoons watching football on the telly or golf. So I'm not doing anything, I'm not working. Sitting with my feet up, falling asleep, mostly. But to enable me to watch a game of football on the telly, hundreds of people have to work. There's the players, the managers, and the coaches, the physio. There's the referees, and unfortunately the people that do VAR. But there's all the people who work in the stadium, isn't there? The people who work in the turnstiles and sell pies, and the stewards and all that kind of stuff. And then there's all the people who clean up. There's a guy who works in the club shop, there's the bus drivers, there's loads of people. And that's not even counting the people who do all the television stuff. For me to watch the football for a couple of hours on a Sunday afternoon probably involves thousands of people having to work. So I wonder what we could do that doesn't involve other people working. Could read a book. Could sunbathe twice a year. Could garden. No, hold on a minute. That sounds like hard work, doesn't it? So is gardening work? Yeah. Cutting the grass? It's definitely work. Not allowed to do that this afternoon. Excellent. What about food? Is cooking work? Yeah. And if I get a takeaway, then somebody else needs to cook and someone needs to drive. Is driving work? And what about at night time? Am I allowed to put the lights on? Because electricity doesn't happen by magic. I know you think it does, but it doesn't. Somebody has to work in a power station, so I'm allowed to put the lights on. I'm allowed to plug something in. It gets really complicated very quickly, doesn't it? Our way of life is completely reliant on somebody working all the time. All the time. And so it was with the Hebrew slaves in Egypt. That's what they did. They worked all the time. Every day. They were told where to go and what to do every day. And if they didn't work hard enough, they got beaten. No holidays, no days off, ever. So thankfully, not many of us find ourselves in that position. And we certainly don't find ourselves in the position where we'd be beaten up if we didn't do our work properly. But plenty of people are forced to do long hours for low pay on 0-hour contracts, while other people are trafficked into modern slavery. It's hard to have a day off when 4.3 million children live in poverty in the UK. That's 9 kids in every single classroom. And 7 out of 10 of those kids have someone at home who works. In 2008, 2009, 26,000 people used food banks. Last year it was over 2 million. Take a day off is impossible. It's literally impossible for people to take a day off. They just can't afford it. People are trapped, just as the people in those slavery situations in Egypt were trapped. And into that situation in Egypt stepped God, who says, right, off you go into freedom, into the wilderness where there's nothing to do. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to give you a list of 10 things, and one of them is to take a day off. It's a commandment. All of you, everyone, take a day off. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your ox, your donkey, any of your livestock, even the resident aliens who live in your town, you know, those migrants that we all complain about, them too. It doesn't say wife, I've just noticed that. It's interesting, isn't it? Your male and your female slaves can take a day off, but not your wife. Somebody's got to cook the dinner. It's a hugely radical idea, isn't it? Every single person, even the livestock, have to take a day off. We all know that rest is vital, don't we? We know that working too hard and too long is bad for us. But we create a society where it's almost impossible for everyone, every single person, to stop for a day. And to stop on the same day, wow, just won't happen. It won't happen because we have a completely different way of living from the people this was written for. And they were completely different from everyone around them. Walter Brueggemann suggests that Sabbath is actually an act of radical resistance. That Sabbath is an act of radical resistance. Because Sabbath stands in opposition to everything that the world requires. We require for everything to be available all the time. Why does Asda have to be opened for 24 hours? Why do I need to be able to click a button and get something delivered tomorrow? How on earth did we manage before? We live in a world at the expense of other people. We live in a world where we measure our well-being by the size of our bank balance. We have never been so well off. Our society has access to more resources, more wealth than at any point in human history. And yet people live in poverty and in the midst of an anxiety epidemic. The way that we live is not good for us. The way that we live is actually killing us. And at the same time, some people are richer than Pharaoh. The 10 Commandments, it's an interesting list, isn't it? For the most part, they seem really, really obvious. Don't kill. Okay. Don't steal stuff. Don't commit adultery. Don't tell lies. These are commandments about good community, aren't they? How do we live together as a society? Well, we probably shouldn't rob and steal and kill and hurt each other. That's pretty obvious, isn't it? But before any of those ones comes this one. Keep the Sabbath. It's number 4. The only ones that come before that are the ones about God. And then there's the last one, the 10 Commandments. What's the 10th one? You've all remembered them. I think it's just made the best face ever. What? I don't know. I knew there were 10, but I don't. What's the last one? Does anybody know? Do not covet. It's a good word, isn't it? It's one of those words we don't really use anymore. Do not covet. You shall not covet your neighbour's house, your neighbour's wife, your neighbour's male or female slaves, or ox, or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbour. Now, we'll have a conversation about why your wife is a possession. Right? That's probably changed. Perhaps for the better. Shall not covet your neighbour's house, your neighbour's wife, male or female slaves, their ox or their donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbour. Brueggemann suggests that this is actually the ultimate commandment. The ultimate commandment about neighbourliness. Sure, we shouldn't try to kill each other, we shouldn't steal stuff. But how do we live together? How do we live together? The 10th commandment expands that whole thing beyond the individual. It's not just about me and my behaviour, it's about us together. And it starts really big. Don't covet your neighbour's house or their wife. They're most valuable things. And then come slaves, an idea which we are absolutely appalled by these days, and so we should be. But slaves were about well-being. So in this context, someone's slaves are the people who look after them, who make sure that they are kept well. And they're also about means of production. How do we make a living? That's what the livestock bit's about too, isn't it? The beasts that work for us. Oxes and donkeys. Doesn't say anything about sheep and cattle. It's about things that pull ploughs or bear loads. Things that look after the household. Don't covet any of it. Don't covet any of it. And just in case you don't get it, don't covet anything that belongs to your neighbour. That changes the conversations we have quite a lot, isn't it? That's a lovely dress. Where did you get it? I really like your car. It's a nice new house you've got. Comparison is the root of so many of our problems. We want what other people have. We're never content with what we've got. And we live in a society where people don't have food. And when you don't have anything to eat, it's hard not to covet someone else's lunch. It's hard to sit back and not want more. I want what my neighbour has. The Sabbath was supposed to remind us that all that we have comes from God. God creates everything. Everything that we have is a gift. And if we have more than others and they don't have enough, then that's a problem. Because we're not doing it right. And when Jesus enters into this argument in the reading that we heard from Mark today, that's what it's about. It's picking grains as you walk through a field. Is that work? It's making sure that somebody has something to eat. Is that work? Really? What about healing somebody? The Sabbath is supposed to be about restoring life. That's what we do when we rest. We restore our bodies. We recreate ourselves. And the land gets a break too. That's important. Our lives are collectively renewed. But restoring life's also about creativity, isn't it? What do you do when you have a day off, apart from collapse in a heap? What kind of hobbies do you have? Who makes things? There's a craft night on a Monday for you. There's only 2 of you, apparently. I know that's not true. Lots of you make things. You're creative. Who plays sport? I know to look at Lewis. It's a big comeback this week. Be good. Sport's creative. Be really boring if it wasn't. There are 100 different ways to play the game. Loads of decisions to make. It's a creative process. The things that we do on our time off help us to be imaginative. Read a book, watch a film, go to a play, listen to music. These are things that help to fire our imaginations. They restore us. They feed our souls. So surely when Jesus heals the man with a withered hand, that's a good thing, right? Well, not everybody thinks so. The Pharisees don't think so. And before we get stuck into the Pharisees, we need to be really careful about who they are. Because they end up like cartoon baddies in the story, don't they? Oh, the Pharisees, they're the baddies. Boo. The Pharisees were a group of ordinary people who tried to keep the law to the best of their ability. It was like a wee holiness club. They weren't priests. They were ordinary people who tried their best to keep the law as fully as they could. And other people really admired them. They weren't like, oh, look at them, we'll check them out. Whether do-gooder nonsense over there. That's not what they were like. People really admired them. People wanted to be like them, but they couldn't because it was really hard. They kept every aspect of the law to the nth degree. And remember that the law is really important because the law is what marks Israel as different. It's not the same as all the other countries round about it. It's different. And it's different because of these rules. So keeping the rules is really important. That's who they are. That's their identity. If you start to mess with the rules, then their identity, well, they don't know who they are anymore. So along comes Jesus and challenges their understanding of the law by keeping the law. And they can't understand. They can't understand. Look at the challenge that presents. The law about the Sabbath, you're not allowed to do anything. Like anything. Why would you want to do anything? It's about having a rest. And Jesus comes and says, yeah, but having a rest is about more than doing nothing. I suppose today we would call it active recovery. You don't just sit down. You go for a walk. You do stuff to help us to recover. Seamus Heaney, the poet, wrote, it takes a kind of courage to find time to play. Work is what's expected. Sober thought, a misership of time hoarding the precious minutes. Fun yields no dividends. No bonuses for jokes. Work earns wages. The jobless are devalued, computer haunted, we've got it wrong. Machines are made to whir and turn, faultless, precise, achieving. The human spirit should have place to soar into wild absurdity. We need permission to uncage the poet. Eyes that rest in beauty seem ineffectual compared to hands that hammer. Yet I take time off from industrious striving to watch, to enjoy my friendships, to delight in touch and taste, to nourish my true self. Dreams, imagination, and God's laughter in creation invite me out of my industrious solemnity to take the task of playing seriously until my marred manhood is recreated in the child I have denied. That's what Jesus' actions are about. Jesus restores the man so he can keep the fourth commandment and the fifth one and the sixth one, but mostly the 10th one. The man can look after himself and his family. He can worship God. He can play his part in the community. rather than being excluded. He doesn't have to now covet what his neighbours have because he can work for himself. He can play his part. But he can also take a day off and keep the Sabbath. Imagine that was true for everyone we met. Imagine it was true for all of us. Imagine the difference it would make if we took time to play and not just time to work.
Lord of all, you are the master and commander of all life. We thank you for the wonder of the universe, for the beauty and fragility of it all. You reign over all of it and ask us to be stewards looking after all creation. We are grateful for the people who lead us in science and technology, who discover amazing facts about the universe and ways to help us learn to look after it more wisely. We give thanks for the people who lead us in medical research, who pioneer new treatments and procedures that give people a better quality of life. We thank you for the people who write stories and create characters and places that help us explore our nature and place in the universe and beyond into the unknown. We are grateful for the people who seek to become peacemakers, who create safe spaces for people to enter into dialogue, sacrificing much to help all humanity. We give thanks for the people who choose to serve their country and try to make the world a better place for everyone. We thank you for the people who take on leadership roles and seek to serve in whatever way you have called them. Lord, our world needs more people to seek you out and follow where you lead. Lord, our world suffers when people choose a different way, a way that does not benefit all life. Lord, give us courage to lead the way and strength to stand up to fear and doubt. We ask these prayers in your name, and together we pray the words you taught us, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory forever. Amen.
So go from this time with the blessing of God, God known to us as Father, Son and Holy Spirit, with us this day and always.
May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you.